What if one of Middle-earth's most enduring mysteries has an answer hiding in plain sight? Today, we're exploring the fate of the Entwives and examining a theory so unsettling, it might change how you think about the Lord of the Rings forever. The Entwives. Their disappearance haunts every Tolkien fan. Treebeard's mournful words echo through the ages. We lost them and we cannot find them. But what if there's more to their story than simple tragedy? What if the clues Tolkien left us point to something far more complex? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial theories about the Entwives, that they didn't simply perish in Sauron's fires, but may have suffered an incredibly dark fate that explains why they could never return home. Before we dive into this theory, I would like to give a special thanks to the subscribers who pointed out this theory in one of our previous videos. What was Mordor before Sauron? You know who you are. Thank you for bringing up this important view on the Entwives question. Now, let's dive into the topic at hand. What Tolkien actually told us. Before we explore any theories, let's establish what the professor himself said. And here's what's fascinating. Tolkien was both specific and mysteriously uncertain about the Entwives' fate. In letter 144, written in 1954, Tolkien gives us what seems like a clear answer. I think that in fact the Entwives had disappeared for good, being destroyed with their gardens in the War of the Last Alliance, when Sauron pursued a scorched earth policy and burned their land against the advance of the allies down the Anduin. But then, and this is crucial, he doesn't stop there. He continues with a possibility that most fans overlook. They survived only in the agriculture transmitted to men and hobbits. Some, of course, may have fled east or even have become enslaved. Tyrants, even in such tales, must have an economic and agricultural background to their soldiers and metalworkers. Did you catch that? Become enslaved. This isn't fan speculation. This is Tolkien himself raising the possibility. But then, in typical Tolkien fashion, he ends with haunting uncertainty. If any survived so, they would indeed be far estranged from the Ents, and any rapprochement would be difficult. I hope so. I don't know. Even 18 years later, in 1972, when directly asked about the Entwives, Tolkien's answer remained the same. As for the Entwives, I do not know. This wasn't evasiveness from an author who knew every detail of his world. This was genuine uncertainty, and it's that uncertainty that makes the mystery so compelling. The obvious answers and why they don't quite fit. The most accepted theory is straightforward. The Entwives died when Sauron burned the Brownlands during his retreat in the War of the Last Alliance. The gardens were destroyed, turning fertile land into wasteland, and the Entwives perished with them. This theory has solid support. The Brownlands are described as barren and lifeless. Tolkien writes, "All the gardens of the Entwives are wasted. Men call them the Brownlands now." The timing aligns with Sauron's scorched earth tactics. But here's what's puzzling. Treebeard's reaction when asked about their death. He becomes genuinely angry. "They did not die. I never said they died. We lost them," I said. "We lost them, and we cannot find them." If they had simply burned with their gardens, wouldn't the Ents have found some trace, some evidence? The Ents searched for years, asking everyone they met, calling their names. Yet they found nothing. Not death, absence. Other theories suggest the Entwives survived and hid, perhaps in the Old Forest, or even in the Shire. Treebeard does show intense interest in the Hobbits' descriptions of their ordered gardens and peaceful farming. And there are tantalizing hints, like Sam's mention of tree folk seen beyond the North Moors. But these hopeful theories have their own problems. Why would the Entwives hide for thousands of years? Why never send word to their grieving husbands? And why would Tolkien himself seem so pessimistic about their chances? A darker possibility, the theory of enslavement. Now we come to the theory that uses Tolkien's own words, but takes them to their logical conclusion. What if some Entwives were indeed enslaved? What if that's why they could never return? This isn't wild speculation. It's building on what Tolkien explicitly suggested. Let's examine why this theory might make sense. The strategic value. The Entwives were masters of agriculture. They had taught men to farm, created vast organized gardens in the Brownlands, and possessed knowledge that could feed entire populations. For a Dark Lord building an empire, that knowledge would be incredibly valuable. The geographic clue. Tolkien specifically mentions that some may have fled east. East from the Brownlands leads directly toward Sauron's territories, and this would have happened during his strategic retreat, when he was consolidating resources, not just destroying them. The economic reality. Tolkien himself notes that even tyrants need economic and agricultural background. Sauron's vast armies needed food. His empire needed sustainability. The Entwives possessed exactly that knowledge. The tragic logic. If captured during Sauron's retreat, the Entwives would have faced an impossible choice: refuse to help and die, or use their gifts to sustain an empire of darkness. Their very nature, their desire to nurture and teach, could have been manipulated against them. Why this theory resonates? What makes this theory compelling isn't just that Tolkien mentioned it, but that it explains so much. Treebeard's certainty, his insistence that they didn't die, combined with his deep sadness, suggests he suspects something worse than death. The estrangement factor. Tolkien's note that any survivors would be far estranged from the Ents makes perfect sense if they had been forced to use their gifts for evil purposes. The shame and trauma would create a barrier that simple distance never could. The impossibility of reunion. Tolkien stated there would be no reunion in history. If the Entwives were simply hiding, reunion might be possible. But if they had been fundamentally changed by their experiences, if their gifts had been corrupted, then reunion truly would be impossible. The broader meaning, whether or not this theory is correct, and Tolkien himself didn't know, it represents something deeper in his work. The idea that evil doesn't just destroy, but corrupts. That innocence can be perverted into serving darkness. That sometimes the worst fate isn't death, but being forced to live with the consequences of our compromised ideals. Tolkien, who witnessed the industrialization of agriculture and the mechanization of rural life, may have been exploring these themes through the Entwives' fate. Their story becomes a meditation on how knowledge meant for nurturing can be twisted into tools of oppression. What this means for the story, this theory adds layers to the tragedy of the Ents. They're not just mourning lost love. They're possibly mourning the corruption of everything their wives represented. The gifts meant to nurture life may have been turned towards sustaining armies of destruction. It also explains the profound sadness that permeates the Ents' story. Treebeard's longing isn't just for reunion, it's for a return to innocence that may be impossible to achieve. Conclusion: embracing the mystery. The truth is, we may never know the Entwives' exact fate, and perhaps that's as Tolkien intended. What we do know is that he considered the possibility of their enslavement seriously enough to put it in writing. Whether this theory reflects reality, or simply represents one of many dark possibilities, it serves as a reminder of the complexity beneath Middle-earth's surface. The Entwives' story isn't just about loss. It's about the price of innocence in a world where good and evil are in constant conflict. Their fate, whatever it was, reminds us that in Tolkien's world, as in our own, the greatest tragedies often involve not just what we lose, but what we're forced to become. So the next time you read Treebeard's lament for the Entwives, remember, their story may be darker and more complex than it first appears, and sometimes the most powerful mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved, leaving us to grapple with possibilities that are both terrible and profound. What do you think? Does this theory change how you view the Entwives' mystery? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden complexities of Middle-earth. Tolkien's world always has more layers to discover. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember to stay by the fire.